Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Album Fight Club Season 3. Because we've been gone for so long, and I know that we said we wouldn't, but I'm pretty sure it's been over a month, Cody, since we recorded that last one. So I guess we're in Season 3 now. I'm here with Cody, of course. Cody, how are you?
Mike, I'm fantastic. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm glad we're back. I do apologize to the listeners in that on the last episode we said we'd be doing this where our schedules would be much more frequent, and then literally just both our schedules just kind of happened as they did. But we can't. I would love to make promises every time an episode airs and say, "Oh, next week we got," but I just can't. I do want to say, Cody, however, did record his first sidebar, so that was nice. That was cool. It's up on the channel if you want to go listen to it.
I did.
Yeah. But we're back with an official Album Fight Club episode. We're back in the ring. 2 albums, 1 artist, one of my favorite artists. I know I have a huge pantheon of favorite artists, so that's not saying much. But a pretty big part of my growing up musically career when I really started getting into actually listening to music and actually listening to albums. This band was pretty prolific in that sort of upbringing, and that, of course, is Van Halen, the pretty infamous hard rock band of the 80s and 90s and not so much 2000s, but it's a whole storied career. Mainly the 80s. The 80s and 70s is really where they kind of hit their stride. Cody, what's your history with Van Halen? Do you have any history with them?
Van Halen rocks. I refuse to have an opinion on the Van Halen / Van Hagar thing.
Sure.
Because if it would be different if Eddie and Alex left, so if it officially became Van Hagar, David Lee Roth is cool. Sammy Hagar is cool. Van Halen as a total, dominant.
Yeah.
They miss up every once in a while, but
oh sure.
But man, I mean, talk about a powerhouse of not only musicianship but also understanding how to utilize song structure to make things so much bigger.
Yeah, I don't want to spend, like you said, I don't want to bring up the debate of Roth versus Hagar, and that's not what we're here to do. I just want to say I think Van Hagar is pretty great. I think they get a lot of crap when they shouldn't. And 5150, the album, the first Hagar album that he did with Van Halen, that's my 3rd favorite Van Halen album, like total, in the whole discography. I think 5150 is so good. But what we're here to discuss is actually 2 David Lee Roth records. They actually happen to be my number 1 and number 2. I won't say which one is which in terms of that placing, but Cody and I had to basically figure out, okay, if we're doing David Lee Roth, that's basically 6 albums to choose from, spanning from the first one, which is, of course, Van Halen 1, they're self-titled, and then ending with 1984, which is the last one Roth did before he left the band and Hagar came in. And so we had to figure out, okay, which 2 records best represent this era? And funnily enough, I think the first and the last are the best ones that represent this era, which of course is the self-titled first one right out of the gate. And the one that they ended on at the time, which, I mean, 1984 is quite the record to be 6 records into your career and you release 1984, sort of like a jolt of adrenaline. So we are here to discuss these 2, which is self-titled versus 1984. I will also mention this is not going to be a track by track, much like the Beatles one. I don't think there's really matchups here that really correlate. 1984 is 9 tracks long, while Van Halen 1, the self-titled, is 11. And we could remove things and move, but it just didn't make sense really in my view. So I think the best way to approach this, Cody, is just what we've been doing with this kind of situation, which is talk about one record top to bottom and then move on to the next one top to bottom and then conclude by talking about both.
So I totally agree. I would just like to say something. I know we said we're not going to talk about the Hagar thing.
Yeah.
People like to have that argument, but PV, their highest selling guitar amplifier of all time is the 5150, which is directly modeled after Eddie Van Halen's tone on that record. Yep. That is, and if you were in any kind of music that is heavier than country, you have seen a 5150. So keep that in mind. If you listen to that record and then you go listen to like your local friend's hardcore band, that's the same palette. And that's fucking awesome because it's amazing what music can do.
And we can have the conversation or not, just talking about Eddie Van Halen in general. I mean, what is there to say really in terms of guitar influence rather than just saying the words Eddie Van Halen in succession? It's like, He is who he was. Regrettably, he died in 2020, which 2020 for me is probably the worst year in terms of musicianship leaving the planet. That year, Neil Peart died, my favorite drummer of all time. Eddie Van Halen died, one of my favorite guitar players of all time. And then MF Doom died, which is my favorite rap artist of all time. So I had a trifecta of like shit happen that year. It wasn't great. But what is great is, as like with Neil and MF Doom, Eddie Van Halen left behind a very great story discography. And of course, his influence, like I said, is just second to none, really, in terms of electrical guitar and hard rock sort of sensation of guitar, which sort of leads into the first record itself. Coming out of the gate with this thing, I mean, there's so much to say in terms of freshman introductory out of the gate first time record. I'm going to hold off a claim that I want to make, but Cody, if you want to say anything introducing the record before we like dive into it, or Eddie Van Halen himself.
So obviously Eddie Van Halen is, rest his soul, top 10 greatest guitar players.
There's an argument for top 5, honestly.
I would even say, yeah, I think top 5 personally.
Yeah.
But the impressive thing about not only Eddie Van Halen, but the entire Van Halen discography is every once in a while, they would just go on these weird detours where you would think that you wouldn't have all of the skills and you wouldn't have all the tools in the toolbox. You know, being an electrician and being a mechanic, those are two different things. But somehow Eddie Van Halen and crew, so Eddie, Alex, and not Sam Hager, but
David and Michael.
Yeah, Michael Anthony. They pulled it out, which is unbelievable. Very rare to find a group of people that can cohesively for a long time just say, we're going to throw that idea at the board, and if it lands, it's going to land really well. And revisiting Van Halen 1, it's crazy because these songs are absolutely timeless because of how raw that they feel in a way. Like, you can tell that these were 4 people who said, we've got some wind kicking in our sails right now. Let's put a fan behind it, and we're just going to go. Because, really, think about Alex Van Halen. Insane drummer.
Yeah, amazing.
Bonkers drummer, truly. You got Michael Anthony, fantastic bass player, and a secret weapon with his backing vocals.
Oh, yeah.
He's all over all of these records. It's insane. And then, obviously, Eddie Van Halen, a virtuoso who knows when to just kind of put it in the can for a minute. That's the important thing about technicality and proficiency. You don't use it all the time. And there are moments on Van Halen 1 where he just kind of says, all right, guys, we're just gonna drop the baggage for a second and I'm gonna do something cool. And then you have David Lee Roth, who, in my opinion, is the only singer in that kind of like hard rock, like kind of segue into metal kind of mishmash that can do the funny mouth noises, and it lands for me. Because all over both of these records, you got David Lee Roth going, ooh.
Yeah. Or like squawking like a bird.
He squawks, and it's so crazy because all of these songs are just having fun. This isn't like Dio with like a message. This isn't Black Sabbath with like some kind of message.
There's not a serious song on any of these records.
No, they want to hang out with girls, stand at the beach, and make noise.
Yeah.
And both of these records, they're hanging out with girls, standing at the beach, making records, standing near fast cars. That's it. That's awesome.
Sometimes that's all you need.
Sometimes that's all you need. Mike and I talked about the depth of the Beatles. This has no depth, and that's what's the fun about it.
Mm-hmm.
Drink a beer, talk to the pretty woman in the corner, hang out near the Porsche. You're good. Fuck it. We're in Van Halen. So,
but the amazing thing is that I totally agree in that the depth-wise, these songs aren't getting at anything profound or world-altering. It's like you said, it's just hanging out a bar scene, a hopping scene, you're hitting on the girl, you're drinking with your buddies. Like that's all it needs to be. And yet the assemblage of musicianship behind these songs, the group as a whole, it's like I bring up this term a lot. It's like it's Mark II Deep Purple. It's like that level of like, holy shit, look at these guys and how good they are in their respective instruments. And, you know, David Lee Roth, he's probably, this sounds ridiculous to say, but honestly, musicianship wise, he's probably the weakest member.
100%.
But the thing is that even in spite of that, David Lee Roth is such a good fit because he's so eccentric. He's such a good frontman. He's such an eye catcher that, yeah, his singing's not the greatest thing I've ever heard, but man, does he sell all these songs. Like he sells every moment that he's on, which the whole, you know, amalgamation of that, I think comes right in the beginning with Running with the Devil.
Crazy.
You mentioned Eddie has this notion of like knowing when to take a step back. And so I can only imagine in 1979 or 78, well, I think this came out in 78, 79, late. Yeah. I can only imagine being like, oh, there's this new band and they're getting a lot of traction. They're called Van Halen. I don't know these guys, right? I'll buy this record. It's $5 at my record store because we wish we lived in those times.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll buy it, throw it on the turntable, put the needle down. And the first thing you hear is like this siren noise coming in. And I think it's Eddie doing something with the guitar, right? It's just like this siren effect fading in, but then it all cuts out and just Michael Anthony going, boom, 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 boom. And then Alex doing the hi-hat count in. Oh God, I don't know. It's so simple, but just to hear the and then like I probably would have stopped the record, brought it back and played it again. Like, what the hell was that? Because this is 1978. This is not 2024. Like, we've heard this before now, but back in 78, like, yeah, you have your Zeppelins, you have your metal bands that kind of do something, but like the sound of Van Halen 1 and the way it is just like a tornado of energy and force is just really unparalleled. And then you get David Lee Roth coming in with the verse, with the vocals he does. And that chorus, man, that chorus is like 10,000 people shouting. And yet it's just Eddie and Michael, really, which you mentioned, Michael does all the backing, and his backing, you can't shun it. It like, he adds so much weight and like force to everything that's happening here. Killer way to start off this record.
Oh, dude, it's insane. And the most impressive part is that it feels like they are all on the same level. Sometimes you'll get a song where 3 out of 4 get the vibe. And then someone, maybe like a drummer or something, like, oh, we're gonna throw like a double kick pattern in here. What are we gonna do with this song? We're gonna have fun. Okay. We're going to write a really neat little chorus and a really neat little bridge, and then we're going to come back into it, and then we're going to do the big ending. And you got David Lee Roth, he's singing his little heart out. You got Michael Anthony playing his little bass out. And not only do you create one of the greatest radio rock songs of all time, but you create, in my opinion, one of the greatest fake outs in album history. Because you listen to this first song and you go, wow, that's really good. That's almost like a perfect rock song. How are we going to follow it up?
Well.
And then, my dear listener, if you have not listened to the first Van Halen record, what follows, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, because I have been wrong in the past on this podcast, is the instance to the second on the atomic clock the guitar music changes.
Oh yeah. And but Cody, I will let you go off, but I just want to talk, like, because I wanted to bring this up myself, is that Running with the Devil ends and you're like, wow, that was sick, like what a perfect, and then and then just goes like the rocket takes off, and like you said, it just the atomic clock shifts 1 degree, 1 notch over, and everything changes.
So then what happens is a song called Eruption, which every single person has heard Eruption.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you do not like guitar music at all. You have heard Eruption. And it is, in my opinion, top 3 greatest efforts of guitar music in the entire category.
It is a complete paradigm shift.
It is. But the very cool thing about Eruption, it's just long enough. It's like a minute and a half. Every single instance of it gets bigger. Typically, as Mike, as you know, sometimes you start a song off real strong and then you fade down. Nope, not with Eruption. You get everybody coming in and they're doing cool stuff. And then slowly, Eddie Van Halen starts to do more cool stuff until he is fucking tapping. This is 1978. I just looked it up. The year after this, Mike, is when The Wall came out. That is the exact moment we're at in history. Pink Floyd is still big.
Mm-hmm.
And you have this kid from California? And his little group of friends blowing every single person who came before right out of the water. Not even a fair chance. Not even a fair fight.
And the thing too is, this is their first album.
It's their
second song, and he's doing album. This. Yeah, and it's just unreal.
It is unreal. And we do this thing often where we give some big moments their flowers, and sometimes it feels unwarranted. If Eruption doesn't happen, we do not get to damn near anywhere we are currently with music.
Yeah,
Mike and I are actually about to go see a band called Between the Buried and Me. Without Eruption, Between the Buried and Me doesn't happen. It is the bottleneck. Because everybody before is really good at solos. You got people in Deep Purple, you've got David Gilmour, you got Black Sabbath, you've got Yngwie doing his thing. We're actually getting into hair metal at this point. But what Eddie Van Halen and the rest of his band did was do something so unbelievable that for a decade nobody could figure it out.
Yeah.
Second song on your first album.
So I rarely do this, but I actually want to read something from somebody else. This is actually an excerpt from a guy named Chuck Klosterman, who, brief history on him, he is a cultural critic and freelance writer for a lot of magazines. He usually takes cultural things and just criticizes how American culture is kind of stupid, which it is. He was a big influence of mine in my master's degree because I was trying to do the same thing. At one time, he ranked every single Van Halen song from worst to best. And at the end of it all, Eruption was his number one pick. And I just want to read what he wrote about it because I think it summarizes it perfectly well. So, according to Chuck Klosterman, quote, "There are those who don't even consider this a song. It wasn't intended for the album. Eddie still insists it includes a mistake. And there are now 8th graders on YouTube who can replicate every single note. But Eruption is the distilled essence of Van Halen, the vortex of their ethos, and the sonic justification for jettisoning every lead singer who starts to seem halfway annoying. The first 45 seconds are impressive, but not transcendent. The music fades out, and any cognate first-time listener would find themselves thinking, well, I guess that was it. I guess that was okay. But suddenly he's back, and now he's attacking the instrument the way piranhas skeletonize a water buffalo. And then he does that thing that he always does, and your living room speakers transmogrify into the P-Funk mothership and ascend through the roof and into the troposphere. It ends with the Doppler effect, except you haven't moved, and neither has he. This is, by the widest possible margin, the most important freestanding guitar solo of all time. And I realize that if you hate Van Halen, this is precisely why you hate them. You hate the sensation of having your brain trapped in a beehive. You hate the distance between the proficiency of the artist and the potentiality of his audience. And you hate that this guy just invented the 1980s. But if you love Van Halen, this is what you love, and you can listen to it 1,000 times without diminishing returns. The experience does not evolve. You will always be inside his guitar. And I think that just kind of, that idea of it never has diminishing returns. It's roughly a minute and something long, and every single time it doesn't get any worse.
It doesn't.
It's an incredible achievement. And it's song 2. It's song
2. And now
album 1.
Now, Mike, I want to make sure that I'm reading this correct. Then what follows is something that Mike typically hates.
Okay.
But
I know.
But this is the exception to the rule.
It has to be.
Because you go from you are on cloud fucking 9. This man has just created something inherently new, Sure, people had done it in the past, and then what do you get? You go, oh, maybe we're gonna drop the ball here. No fancy stuff. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba-bum. Over.
Yeah.
Every single person in the arena, in the planet, every single person who bought Van Halen 1 got to this third song and stood up and chugged a Miller Lite and lost their mind.
And looked up if they were coming to a city near them so they could go see them live.
Called Ticketmaster and said, what is the nearest Van Halen date?
Yeah.
Because, Mike, they go into a cover of You Really Got Me. But it's not a cover in terms of, oh, we're respecting the original source material. It is a cover in terms of, I like that jacket, I'm going to make my own.
Yeah. It is it's a total reinvention, and you're totally right, Cody. You called me out for it, and you rightfully did. Where every other time this has happened on this podcast, I have hated it. I hate when bands do this. Don't put a cover song in your main track list, but god damn it, dude. This is the one time where I'm like, I'm totally fine with it. They take this song by the Kinks, which nothing against the Kinks. They made a very good version of, I think it's the Kinks, right?
Yeah, the Kinks.
Okay, yeah, I didn't want to get that wrong. They made a very good version of this song, and it's still a great song that they do, but man, the way Eddie comes in with that crunchy version of their riff, it's just like just rediscovering something that you had the entire time, but just like looking at it from a different angle. And looking at it from that different angle just makes it like 20 times more impactful. Just such a good, honestly, when I first revisited all this stuff, I was like, I forgot this is even a cover.
Mm-hmm.
I just assumed this was their song. And then I was like, no, wait a minute. This is actually a cover. And it's on the main track list. And I don't hate it at all. I could not envision this album without this song in it, without this song on it, and without its placement right after Eruption. And if I'm not mistaken, on radio, they actually play Eruption and You Really Got Me together.
Yeah. Yep, they put them together. And this is, in my opinion, when the record really, really kicks in. It's almost like Running with the Devil was a tease. And then they go, okay, here's Eddie, because you get David Lee Roth doing my favorite thing in the world that like these 80 hair metal bands do. He just throw the second those drums kick in, ooh, and it's over, man.
Yeah, it's goddamn cool.
So there's so much swagger in every single one of these songs that even if you didn't like music, you were someone who only liked to hear a book turn or the sound of wind chimes, you're gonna get, it's like drinking water after you haven't had water all day. You just go, holy shit, dude. Yep. And everybody is on it. They are just on fire. And this is in a similar instance to like All Along the Watchtower by Jimi Hendrix. Bob Dylan wrote All Along the Watchtower. That's a Dylan song. This isn't the Kinks anymore.
Yeah.
They took it and they said, well, we like this song. We got to put some, and it's such a bold move to put it as track 3. Typically, what we have seen in the past is your cover song, it's going to be like 7, 8, 9, maybe at the end of the record, maybe a bonus song. Van Halen said, we're proud of it. We want a party. Let's just have a good time.
They knew they had gold.
They knew they struck gold, and every single time, just like with Eruption, no diminishing returns. Every single time, You Really Got Me plays on Spotify or plays on the radio, or I hear it just walking around in like a Walmart or whatever, I get chills. Mm-hmm. Because it is the perfect example of taking something that you like and just making it your own.
Yeah. It's sort of a similar situation with when Johnny Cash did Hurt by 9 Inch Nails. Even Trent Reznor himself came out and was like, yeah, it's not my song anymore. Like, he totally just took it and made it so much better than anything I possibly imagined.
Right. And it doesn't make the Kinks version any worse.
Yeah.
It just is such a beautiful kind of adaptation for a song that really is just like a kind of goofy little ditty.
Yeah, and Cody, I don't know how you feel about it, but from here on, like you said, this is where the record really kicks off. From here on, this is where the record just hits like 11 out of 10 for me. Every song, except we'll get to the later like end, because towards the end I think the record takes a little bit of a dip.
Yeah.
But from here till like the next 5 tracks, man, are they just on speed, fire, whatever you want to call it? Because you get Ain't Talking About Love after that, and that fucking riff, the boom 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 boom.
And so this is what I was talking about when you get Eddie Van Halen knowing when to put it in the bag for a minute. Because this riff could have been insane. It could have been insane. It isn't. And during the verses of Ain't Talking About Love, he's just doing these little chords.
Mm-hmm.
These like triple chords. These like ba 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 ba. 5 minutes ago, you changed the world.
Yeah, he invented the 80s 5 minutes ago.
You invented the 80s 5 minutes ago, and now you're like, all right, well, I got bored of that. Or we didn't want to do it. It didn't sound good. That's insane!
And you're right that the riff is simple, but man, is that riff just kick ass.
Oh, it's $1 million riff.
It's so good. And everyone on top of it's good, and everything around it is good. And one of my favorite parts of the song is when they get to the very end, and they're just going, hey, 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 hey. Oh man, it's just like, it's that fist pumping, tapping on the steering wheel, driving 10 miles over the speed limit when you shouldn't be, like, just so good.
And such a beautiful thing about almost all of these choruses, too. They don't, that when Van Halen realized that their voices mesh together in like that Beach Boys kind of way, where it's like we all get this harmony together, man, they just sell it. Because you've got Eddie and Michael just in the back, hey, talking about love, and it's over.
Yeah, it's so good.
It's over, and it kills me because this is song 4.
Yep.
You might think that people might look back at some music from the late 70s or early 80s and go, well, yeah, like disco came. This stays timeless because they knew the ingredients. This is the pot roast. This is the beef stew of hard rock and heavy metal. Make it good. Make it about having fun. Turn the guitar up. Make the bass a little loud. Drums are good. Get a guy who can sing. Perfect. Thanks. Out of here.
Yep. It's
in a cookbook. But no one does it as good as Van Halen did at this point.
Yeah. It's just, and continuing, you just mentioned that Eddie knows when to take a step back and just do something simple, but he also knows when to take a step forward and give you pure insanity, which the beginning of I'm the One, where he's doing like that boom, oh my God, dude. And in 1978, like, this is something you hear, like you pull any Joe Schmo heavy metal hard rock record and you hear this. Like, yeah, this is common. 1978 though, the beginning of I'm the One, my head would be spinning. I'd be like, I don't know what's happening. I can't keep track of this. Because guitar music suddenly became something else when Van Halen comes on the scene.
Yeah.
And you just do not hear things like I'm the One before Van Halen.
No.
Plus the rest of the song's amazing.
Yeah. Well, the crazy thing is, obviously, we're in the year 2024, and so we've got bands like The Contortionists, we got Between the Buried and Me, we have Meshuggah, who, in my opinion, did it. I think Bleed is top 2, just in terms of, like, this is what a guitar can do.
Yeah, it definitely, it's arguably a paradigm shift as well, is Bleed.
It is, because now it's 7 strings, and we're just playing a rhythm. But how animalistic does that rhythm become? But once again, if this is 1978, no one has a computer to just put that metronome on. You're cutting to tape, dude. You got to be on. And it's crazy at the level of proficiency that these songs are at. Your first record.
Mm-hmm.
You're only swinging up from this. You got 5 records after this, too, that are just holding the ground, essentially. But it's just amazing. And then, do you have anything else you'd like to say about On the One?
Yeah, just one more thing.
Yeah.
I believe this is the song, I think so, where they do the scat, the ba-ba-da, shoo-doo-doo-ba.
Yeah.
And it comes out of literally nowhere, right? It is not the song at all. And then they get into like this old-timey like barbershop quartet, and it's just so cool. It has nothing to do really with anything that came before it, and yet it fits so well. And then after it, just Alex and Eddie doing and building back up to the chorus. It's so good.
And that, like Mike said, the really impressive thing about this is that really the benefit of this being your first record is that no one knows what you're about.
Mm-hmm.
So throwing in these little like acapella doo-wop things where you're a barbershop quartet, who cares? Who cares? Van Halen started the tour for this record opening for Black Sabbath. What's fun? What's more exciting than, okay, well, we're going to hear 2 hours of doom metal, essentially, in gnarly riffs. What's funnier than a bunch of dudes from California running around just scat singing everywhere, just snapping their fingers, having a good old time? We got this guy wearing like a tracksuit or whatever, like a mechanic's outfit. Who cares, dude? We're having fun. And then they kind of bring it down a little bit. They just slow that metronome down. Jamie's crying. Disgusting.
I'm crying for how good this song is.
Insane song.
It's got such weight to it. It's such and that's the thing with the whole record. It's got such a bite that prior to 1978, you didn't hear bite like this. You kind of did with Led Zeppelin. You kind of did with Black Sabbath. But something about Van Halen's just like, it's the gnashing teethness of what separates them from like all their rock contemporaries. And suddenly they're like hard rock. This is hard. Just that the like it's gnashing teeth, it's scraping nails, and it's just like so heavy on you. In spite of the fact that all the subject matter here is just not heavy at all. It's
not heavy at all.
Arguably, you could say this song's kind of heavy. It's about a girl who wants this guy, and the guy doesn't want her back, so she's crying over it. But like, we're not talking about the end of the world or anything. We're just talking about stuff people go through. Yeah, I love Jamie's crying. And for it to be like a super slow moment after so many fast moments, I think is great.
So, a little, Mike, you probably know this, but people at home might not know this. The thing that's so legendary about Eddie Van Halen's guitar tone is he was the first person to really, like, I don't want to say commercially, but kind of widespread use what's called a variac into his amplifier. And a variac is a power conditioner where you can lower the voltage that your amplifier is receiving. Now, what that does is it makes your tubes push harder. So you can drop your variac wattage to like 45 watts with a 100-watt amp. And then you're starving the tubes for power. You push the gain, and that's what's called the Brown sound. And that's what gets that really, really... Because a lot of guitar tones... You like think about Brian May from Queen, for example. Real trebly. Very little low end to it because that's what a bass is for. You've got a lot of Stratocasters coming with the British stuff like Deep Purple. David Gilmour is famous for playing a Strat. Tony Iommi's playing an SG, which is heavy, but it's a little muddy. The thing about Eddie's tone is when you're starving the tubes, you get just you cannot recreate grit because you're physically making the amplifier push harder. Then what happens is you've got Michael Anthony with a really, really kind of percussive bass tone filling out all of that dead space that the gain's not hitting. That's what I think separates this record in particular over the rest of everything that's coming out at this time. Because you have Eddie Van Halen really filling out these sonic spaces that people hadn't heard before, which is very, very cool.
Definitely ahead of their time, for sure.
Yeah.
And so much so ahead of their time that you have people like Hendrix prior to this, who was obviously a guitar legend. He was doing crazy things, right? He's playing with his teeth. He's playing behind his back, whatever. But then Eddie comes along, he goes, well, I don't need to like do fancy tricks. I can just do fancy things with the guitar. And you get the intro of Atomic Punk, which I don't know what he's doing. it almost sounds like he's taking like his something Tom Morello would do or something. He's taking his hand and just like wiping it up and down the fretboard is almost what it sounds like. But I know later on he would take things like drill bits and like use that to make noises with the guitar. Like rather than doing fancy things with the guitar, he took tools to make fancy stuff happen with the guitar, which is the case for Atomic Punk, is the case for other songs. And it gives a song like Atomic Punk so much more like thematic weight to it. Because, I mean, the first intro of Atomic Punk sounds like it was drenched in acid. It's atomic. It's like radioactive. It's what it feels like.
I totally agree. And actually, Atomic Punk is my favorite song on this record.
Really?
Yeah, because it's crazy. It is crazy. Because this is, in my opinion, when you're running, right? Because they've hit their stride. If we're going to put it in some kind of like analogy, they've hit their stride on this record. When you're running, eventually you're gonna get tired, but you're gonna go, I just gotta stay in it. I gotta stay in it. I can't stop running. And this is where they hit it. Because now they're doing fancy stuff, but the shimmer has kind of shifted. They've done the cool stuff. All right, let's put it in an application. And then you just get Van Halen that's a damn good hard rock band. And I love that there's very little kind of BS to it. There's not a lot of stuffing. Play the drums. You want to see how good of a band we are? All right, here we go. And that's so cool to me because later in their career, and they're doing things, they get a synthesizer and things like that. This is them distilling into, you think we don't deserve this credit? No, because you couldn't even play this song. How are you going to play Eruption? That's what I love about Atomic Punk. It's almost like a middle finger to everybody who's like, all they are is Flash. No, we're just a good band.
It's funny you say that's your favorite song. It's definitely one of my favorites among many favorites here. I don't know if I have a favorite song in this record just because so many songs are just so killer. Which leads into Feel Your Love Tonight, which, I mean, I don't know the conversation of favorite song, but what I love about Feel Your Love Tonight, it feels live.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like a studio track. It feels like they're playing this live. It's just it's got such energy behind it. And every time it comes on, I sing with them, right? You can't not sing the part where they're going, I can't wait to feel your love tonight. Like, how do you not? The only thing I will say is that my least favorite moment on this entire record does happen in this song. And they sing the I can't wait to feel your love tonight. Mm-hmm. Ooh! It's like, what is that? Why did you do that? And they do it one time. They don't do it anywhere else. I probably blew out the mic when I did that. They don't do it anywhere else on the album. And it's like, okay, if you did it like at the end of every chorus, I would see that there's some pattern here. They just like do it randomly. And where the scatting thing in I'm the One was awesome and came out of nowhere, that was something where it came out of nowhere. I'm like, that was kind of stupid. But luckily they only do it one time. And it's like, okay, they don't do it again. So
yeah.
Other than that, though, this is a 10 out of 10 track for me.
I totally agree. And even if this is hypothetically weaker in comparison to some of the other songs, just in terms of like showmanship, it's like I always no good.
It's weaker by like 0.001%.
Yeah, I always make this comparison where it's like, okay, just like with Atomic Punk, it's like, sure, this might be weak for the first Van Halen record, but any other band, this is like their single. This is the song that they are pushing. MTV's going to get a hold of it. They're going on a Spotify playlist. And Van Halen's like, okay. We're putting the work in.
Yeah. I can't stress enough how much energy this record has, and the song in particular. Like, it's amazing how live this feels. I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of the song you heard the audience cheering and clapping. That's how live it feels.
Yeah.
Which I think just speaks to how good the band is and was, etc. I would say if there is like overall song-wise a weak moment on the record, for me it would be Little Dreamer. Yeah. I think Little Dreamer is just the weakest moment on the song on the tracks. It's the moment where the record kind of takes a little dip for me, because you go from like 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10 to what is basically probably for me like an 8 out of 10. It's a good song. It's got great moments, but it's just not like the hype energy you've been pulling this whole record. Like, you just get this song that's like, yeah, it's good. It makes for good radio. It makes for like a good down moment to like calm yourself and like wipe yourself off all the sweat you've been building up.
Yeah.
But it's not, for me, it's not the song that I would come back to all the time with this record. If I had to remove a song, that would be my pick.
Well, so I totally agree with you, but like I was saying, like I kind of mentioned earlier, first record, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And I like that these last 3 songs are really them just kind of having fun with it. Because what the next song, Ice Cream Man, that's the one that does like the blues riff, right?
Oh yeah, the doom ba doom ba doom ba doom ba doom. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Wild.
That's
wild
crazy.
Song.
20 minutes ago, I'm going to keep going back. 20 minutes ago, you changed the guitar music, and now you're playing like a blues scale.
On acoustic guitar.
On an acoustic guitar. That's crazy. But I think what these 3 songs do is really kind of end on an atmosphere of like carefreeness, like being like, we're gonna have fun, man. Because I think some bands would have doubled down and been like, all right, we got 2 more Eddie Van Halen masterpieces, and I think that would have boiled away from what Eruption does.
Well, the thing too for me is, I if anyone was doubting David Lee Roth, because obviously you can't doubt Eddie.
No.
Nowhere on this record can you doubt him. You can't really doubt Michael Anthony. He's really doing great stuff here. And Alex is just killing all these songs. If anybody's going to be doubted, it's David Lee Roth. It's like, oh, he's just singing, right? You know, anybody can just jump on these tracks and sing, which I don't think is true, but you know, maybe that argument is there. Ice Cream Man is the moment where they go, okay, it's not just some random Joe Schmo singer. Like, this dude can sing. This is definitely David's moment on the record. I think it's his best performance on the record by far, and it really shows off why he was such a good front man, such a good vocalist for this band. I could only imagine seeing this live in 79, 78 era, like seeing Ice Cream Man live, and what David is doing with it on stage. Like, forget about it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think what David does in terms of his lack of technical prowess is he's able to just keep up. He keeps ahead of the pack, essentially. Because you got to really think about it. You have bare minimum 2 world-class musicians. Michael Anthony, in my opinion, is a bass player who doesn't get enough respect because he just held it down. That's all he had to do. And there are moments later in their career where he's going to do some cool stuff, but like, no, your job as a bass player is to be the glue. That's what we do. So you have David Lee Roth, who is like this little, he's like a golden retriever that you gave like a bang to. He's just like, oh man, we're going to have fun today, boys.
Yeah.
And I think that's what he sells on this record is, I deserve to be here because I've got the most swagger out of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's some moments that are going to come up on 1984, but when he's singing, I'm like, man, I get why he does a solo record and it kills. Because he's just he's exuding confidence.
I get why all the ladies liked him.
Yeah.
Like, it makes sense.
Yeah. And then, you get to On Fire.
Which is such a underrated Van Halen song. Nobody talks about On Fire, and yet it's such a killer moment, such a great concluding track. Bar none the performances, but just the like when the chorus hits, I don't know if it's just David and Michael singing, but it feels like all 4 of them are singing. Like, that's how much vocal presence it has.
Yeah.
Which, if that is true, that's a great way to end the record, because then it's all 4 of them like putting themselves into it beyond their own instruments. I love On Fire. Like I said, I don't think it gives enough credit, really.
No, and I think the only reason it doesn't get enough credit is because it is sitting dead last. And, I mean, before this, you got to think. You've got Running with the Devil, Eruption into You Really Got Me, Ain't Talking About Love, Jamie's Crying, Atomic Punk, which, like I said, favorite song, Feel Your Love Tonight. And so it's like, by the end, you're like, damn, dude. Okay, it's over? So I imagine a lot of people would just probably restart the record. That's probably where it falls. So people probably don't even really ever come back to it because it's the last song on a record full of genuine masterpieces.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a good song, but 26 minutes before this, this curly headed kid changed guitar music, and he's playing guitar. That's cool, but whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the best way to sum up all of this is just not just what Eddie did, but what all of them did, and how much of a achievement this is for a band coming right out of the gate. Like I cannot fathom that this is as good as it is when this is their first record. And like it's just a bunch of dudes. Like this is like garage band stuff. Like this is a bunch of guys just getting together being like, yeah, we seem pretty good. Let's just do this. And then they come out with this thing. And not only does it change the face of guitar music, but beyond guitar just by itself, it's just such a good record top to bottom.
Well, exactly. And this is a good example of having a band of people that trust each other to make the right decisions and knowing how to communicate musically and go, hold on, this song has to be good. This part doesn't have to be good. The whole song has to be good. Because, like I said, you've got Eddie Van Halen knowing when to pull the tricks out. You've got David Lee Roth knowing when to throw that confidence in there, but then also knowing when to step back and go, hey, whole band singing on this chorus. I'm just going to hit that harmony with them. You've got Alex Van Halen doing exactly everything he needs to on the drums. And in my opinion, like I said, the glue that holds all this together, you have Michael Anthony, who is just playing really good, cohesive bass lines that work for the song. This could have been a total sideswipe moment where you have four people, all very good at their instrument or their instrument of choice, whether it be vocals or singing, bass, things like that, drums, fighting for it. And instead, they said the whole group will succeed if we just put it together. And I love that about it.
And from here, they make a lot of great records.
Yeah.
I think Van Halen 2 is kind of coming off Van Halen 1. Van Halen 2 really doesn't put much weight forward, but they also had to make it within like less than a year after Van Halen 1. Women and Children First, I think, is a great record. But then you get Diver Down, which is a lot of cover filling, right? So you get this stretch of records, and I'm setting this up for the next record we're about to talk about. You get this stretch of records, which are good. Some of them are great, but none of them, I think, really hit the sort of stride of Van Halen 1. They really did their, like, up until what we're about to talk about, they really like put all their best. Their first basket was full of all their greatest eggs. And like every basket after that, they put a few good eggs in there, but really they were like, here's a throwaway song, whatever. And then the year 1984 comes around and they're like, okay, well, record company wants a record. What do we do? And this feels like an Abbey Road moment where they're like, guys, let's just all just fucking bring it. How about we do that? How about we just like try and hit the mark of Van Halen 1 again and really bring it back to like what we used to do. And by God, do they give us quite the record in 1984. And I mean, Cody, I don't know if you want to preamble with anything, but I don't know what to say about 1984 without getting deep into it, other than as amazing as it is that they had their first record and it's as good as it is, it's also just as amazing. They're 6 records deep, and this record is as good as it is.
So here is my opinion on 1984. Eddie Van Halen goes out to Guitar Center. He buys a synthesizer. He then plugs the synthesizer in, and then the same rush of adrenaline that came when he first figured out that he can take a little power generator and drain the voltage to make one really cool noise comes from the synthesizer. But instead of really, really sitting down and writing a whole bunch of unbelievable party songs, they write about 6 undeniable masterpieces of radio music, of what rock and roll should be, and then a couple of them have some weird choices. But I think 1984 works as a band who's only playing stadiums. It's big. It's big. It is unbelievably big. And you listen to it on headphones, it's like the sound isn't even fully there. Like, this is a record that I think could use a remix. And just because you listen to the tones on it and it's so big. But I think what it is, whereas Van Halen 1 is we're coming from the garage to opening for Black Sabbath and we got to bring it. This is, we've now got 25,000 people a night who need to have fun. That's a different world, man. Guitar stuff, we're going to bring in the synth now. We're going to bring these epic sounds that might be a little distilled from Van Halen 1, but we're carrying and propelling the energy. That's what I think 1984 succeeds with. Because you look at the hits off this record.
Yeah, bro. Like
Impossible. And what I mean by distilling Van Halen 1, there's a couple songs on 1984 in particular where it's almost like Van Halen 1 went, joined the army, came back. And now, same person, a little more structured, but a little more willing to take a chance. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. This might be wrong, but Van Halen 1 feels like moments where they just got super lucky. Where like some of the songs work because they just found lightning in a bottle. A lot of songs in 1984 work because they know why. They know how to make it work. And I think you summed that up really well by saying like, this is one of the best stadium rock albums ever. Like it just is massive. It's huge. You can see these songs being shout out to 50,000 people at once. Like it just, man, so good.
And to be, as you know, Mike, and as people hopefully listening at home, you have to change with your audience in a way. And I think that this is a really prime example of that success. Some people change and they start to dumb things down, or they start to become caricatures of the success that brought them there. I think 1984 is Van Halen going, well, we know that we innovated once. Now we just have to innovate for people who already are captivated, and we're good. And I love that about this record, because from the opening jump, you expect Van Halen, to come in with this like giant guitar thing. They're the guitar band. The guitar band. Nope. Synth.
Yeah.
Pads of synth.
Which is funny as an intro, because the intro, I mean, the first track is called 1984. It's basically an intro to Jump, really. And it sort of is this moment where it's like, okay, here is the future, 1984. And it's synth of all things, which we know now, 30 years removed, 40 years removed, synth dominated the 80s, right? It was the 80s, was synth music. And so for Van Halen, like you said, the big guitar band to come in with synth of all things, you're like, I imagine a lot of Van Halen fans were like, excuse me? Like, what is this?
Exactly.
But I think those same Van Halen fans then got to Jump and were like, okay, it's not guitar, but I'm willing to listen. And by the end of Jump, they're like, okay, that was pretty fucking cool.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Because, I mean, you talk about the hits on this thing. I don't know if Van Halen ever had a bigger hit than Jump.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Because you get to this record, right? And like, synth had been used, and it had been a prominent component of music. But to double down on it, and instead of writing this really, really big orchestral thing, people are going to sing along to this. Let's make it notes that people can sing to. And I personally think that, like I said, with Eddie figuring out the Variac, he was probably just excited to have a new toy.
Yeah.
Probably just like, I'm gonna sit in a room by myself for 2 months and just every knob, every option, I'm gonna go through all 10,000, and I'm just gonna figure out what works best. And then you get one of the most iconic openings to any song ever.
Yeah.
Crushes. People who would have been stressed about this record probably got to this moment and said, we're good. I don't have to hear the rest.
You know, they brought it into the record label and they turned it on. The record label was like,
oh yeah.
Oh, we've got a hit, boys. Like,
yep.
They were just like, how much money do you want? Yeah, here you go.
But then also you still have Eddie Van Halen playing guitar. You've got Michael Anthony doing the backing vocals. You got David Lee Roth, Alex on the drums. But it's just so much more elevated to knowing that instead of having to fight for people's attention, you're going to walk out and 25,000 people are going to challenge the Richter scale, because they're going to start jumping and clapping. And that is what I think Jump does so well. It exudes this, like, whatever you have going on in your life for the next 40 minutes, we're going to have fun, baby.
Yeah.
And that's all we're doing. We're going to shoot confetti, and David Lee Roth, he's going to do jumping jacks, and you're here for a show tonight.
It's crazy.
Crazy.
What's even crazier is they follow Jump up with Panama of all songs, and oh my dear God.
Yep.
You go with your like biggest hit to like something that literally goes toe to toe with it, in my opinion. I think Panama is so goddamn good. And one thing we haven't quite talked about yet, we're only 3 tracks in, so it makes sense, but we cannot not talk about Alex Van Halen's drum sound on this record. And we'll get to the drum song in a little bit, but the drum sounds on this, the way his drum set sounds, I'm struggling to think of an album where the drums sound better than they do on 1984.
Yeah.
They just sound so crisp. The toms have such a boom to them. It's like, and you know, this Panama opens with the riffing of Alex and the boom boom of like Eddie riffing, Alex drumming, right? And it's them like going back and forth with each other, and it's so good. Other than Panama just being like a killer radio song and such a good Van Halen song.
Oh, but then they do this really cool thing where during the bridge they go into this little like reggae almost. It's like a kind of similar vibe to The Police, where there's like it's not like a samba beat, but it's like a world beat, and you got David Lee Roth talking about like leaning the seat back.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, that's cool because
the car's revving too. Like, it's so good.
Because you've got Eddie Van Halen swing it back in, going, I didn't forget about the guitar. This whole song, I didn't forget about the guitar. Don't you guys worry.
Yep.
I'm still playing the guitar.
For the Van Halen fans who didn't care for Jump, Panama's there to be like, you're still good. We still know who we are. Yeah.
Crusher. Insane. And a fantastic way. Because I imagine when this record came out, they probably played the whole thing. This is probably in the day of them being like, we're doing a record tour. You're getting the whole 40 minutes of this plus 30 minutes of everything else.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised because it's a killer damn record.
Insane.
Top to bottom. Yep.
Insane record. And then you want to talk about guitar. Dude.
Yeah.
You get the top Jimmy. I don't know what's happening there.
Such a cool intro.
I've been trying to figure it out.
I feel like he's plucking, but there's also a part of me that thinks he's just like tapping notes.
It sounds like he's like doing like Nashville chicken picking.
Yeah.
But it's like he's tuned everything out of whack. Because it just has this like uneasiness of almost like being on a boat for the first time and you don't have your sea legs. Because you hear him, he's like sliding up and down the neck, and you're like, who threw this? This is a stadium rock record. What is this song? But then they bring it back in the choruses, and it's like the guitar tuning that he's in is insane. Because the chorus, you're like, I want to sing along, but I cannot figure out what note we're in.
Yeah,
but somehow everybody else has it locked in,
and Top Jimmy, I think, is more of a lesser known Van Halen song. I'm sure this wasn't a radio hit. I'm sure it wasn't much airtime, but it still pulls its weight because the whole guitar thing, just the like it's just cool as shit. And then just the Top Jimmy looks, Top Jimmy swings. Like it's such a fun song. All these songs are super fun. But it just keeps the train going, keeps the momentum building. Lesser known song, but I think just as great. Maybe not just as great as Panama and Jump, but still very good.
It almost feels like he got together with like Frank Zappa, and Frank Zappa was like, well, you could just do this, and like tuned and just like turned one knob and out, and Eddie Van Halen was like, well, this is all I'm doing for next month. Yeah. Thanks. Just standing alone in a room, just doing different finger placements, being like, how can I get this to sound unbelievable? Yeah. And then, what's next, Mike?
So Drop Dead Legs comes next. And Cody, I actually wanted you to start this conversation of this song. Unless you want me to. Unless you really want me to start it. Because I feel like what I'm going to say is probably going to set up another conversation. Drop Dead Legs to me is not only my least favorite song on both these records, I think it's really forgettable. I think it just kind of floats by, which just sucks to say because so much of this record is like 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10 in some moments. But Drop Dead Legs, other than doing this exercise of revisiting these records and like really focusing and really like, I forgot what Drop Dead Legs even sounded like.
Yeah.
I forgot what this song was. Sitting here now, I forget pretty much a lot of it. I mean, I like that they have cowbell. That's very like cool and a neat thing to do. I think a lot of the performances on it aren't that exciting. Not that they're bad. They're just not exciting when you've got so many other exciting songs on this record. It's just so forgettable. I think a week from now, I'll remember Panama for the rest of my life. I'll remember Jump for the rest of my life. Drop Dead Legs, like a week from now, I'll probably forget how the song even starts.
Yeah, it's a very weird thing to have thrown in between. So, like I said, whenever I was talking about this record, I think they nailed it right about 6 times.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is them being a little avant-garde.
It really feels like, I don't want to say Drop Dead Legs is bad. It's not. But my issue is, like I said, it's forgettable. It feels like they got all the other songs, and there's one other song where I think it kind of falls under the same trend, where they're like, okay, we got Panama, we got Jump, we got the one we're about to get to next. It's like, okay, but we can't just release that. That's an EP at that point. What do we do? And he's like, well, Eddie pulls out his drawer of like riffs. He files through it really quick. I've got this one. And they listen to it. They're like, yeah, it's okay. That'll work. And then they just make Drop Dead Legs.
It feels like a song that if a strip club owner came up to a band and said, write me a song that I can play in between dances.
Yes.
That's what this song feels like. Like, people are going to be getting drinks, but I need something so it's not just the silence of people moving cash around.
Mm-hmm.
And it works. But it's just in the rest of the pantheon, especially the next song.
Okay, so then the strip club owner said, okay, guys, do that. While you're at it, make me also a strip club anthem. Make me something that all the girls will want to dance to. And they come up with, Cody, my favorite Van Halen song, Hot for Teacher. I don't even know where to start, but you obviously start with that stupid fucking intro of that Alex doing whatever the hell he's doing on drums. And keep in mind, I've played drums for the better part now of like, I don't even know, like 15 years or something. I still can't play the intro to Hot for Teacher. I just can't do it. I can't figure it out. And I've been trying, dude, for like 10 years at this point. I cannot get it down. And of course, he's got things I don't, which is I'm pretty sure he had like a bass drum standing vertical and would play the bass drum like a tom while also kicking on a bass drum. So like I can't physically do that because I don't have that. But like even trying to replicate it on toms, I just can't do it. But it is the coolest goddamn drum intro ever. Like that whole thing of like never has diminishing returns. Hot for Teacher, every time I hear it, it's the first time I hear it. It's just so cool. And deep into it, you know, he gets the and then it's like, oh my God, what are we doing here? And then the whole band comes in and it's like the coolest sounding noises you've ever heard. And you're like, oh my, like it's like the earth is shaking, right? And you think they're just going to keep doing it, and then boom.
The fucking guitar lick that he goes into, right before you have at this point Diamond David Lee Roth. He goes, ooh, over.
Yeah,
and you know what? First Van Halen got 25,000 people to the stadium. This song locked the doors. It's unbelievable that no band since has done this. You think Motley Crue would have came along and outdone this? This is grabbing hair metal by the head and saying, you tried and failed. I had to come back after 5 records. I had to come back to this. We bought a synthesizer, dude. And what, Rat couldn't hold it down? Cinderella couldn't hold it down? Motley Crue couldn't hold it down? Fine. Dad's coming home.
Yeah.
And it is a showcase of just it's like your cool uncle you see once every decade. He just comes back into town. He never knocks. He opens the front door to your house. And he goes, hey guys, I'm going to stay here for the weekend. And everybody's cool with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because they are having so much fun.
Yeah, this is like hanging off the chandeliers and like using it as a swing set. It's fun.
Yeah, because you have, at this point, the staples of a Van Halen song. Got Alex with top 5 drum intros.
I'm willing to say number 1, honestly. Like it's
I'll
so
agree
good.
with you. It's between that and like When the Levee Breaks.
Yeah.
Those are the two that are swinging. And then what? You've got Eddie Van Halen coming in, and you can tell this isn't even work for him at this point. He comes walking in. He comes walking in, amplifier on, plugs in, and then whole band comes in. Fucking Michael Anthony crushing it. You got David Lee Roth, and like Mike said, you think, oh, they're on. This was their little bit of warm up before, like I said, he's like, ooh, and it is over. Rest of the song into that cool little lick. And then, dude, you got him talking about being a kid, leaving his pencil at home. We're back. Hey, we're back. Insane. And then you've got the trio of David, Eddie, and Michael Anthony singing, I got it bad, so bad. I'm hot for teacher. And this is the song that I was alluding to earlier where you can tell that David Lee Roth, I don't know if he did like a shot of whiskey beforehand, because he is just sweating. He is just on fire with this song. Because at this point, you're not playing. Like I said, like I keep saying, you got 25,000 people in the door. Now you got to work for it. But you're going to have fun. And it's just unbelievable. The guitar tone is insane. The bass tone is great. The drum sound, Mike?
Yeah. Every song should sound like this drum-wise. Is like that's what I would put it down to.
It is crazy to me. I think it's the joke on the record, personally. But in the way of like, oh yeah, well we went and we bought a synthesizer and now we're writing like these really pop songs. And then you get to Hot for Teacher and it's like, oh, we're just fucking with you.
Yep.
We're still Van Halen.
Yeah, I want to come back to that moment where they all like cut out and it's just Eddie doing the and it's so quiet and you're like, what? And then David comes in and is like, oh wow, man. What do you think she's gonna look like this year? And then you talked about the ooh, and oh my god! But beyond what makes that work is 2 things for me. Actually 3. One is because nobody's playing except Eddie, right? And you go from literally 1 to 10 in 2 seconds. 2 is the David Lee Roth oohing and all, like it just makes it so cool. But the third thing, I think the secret weapon of those moments is those goddamn fills that Alex is doing before everyone. We're just like oh, it's so cool. They're like some of the coolest fills I've ever heard. Yeah, this is. I already said it's my favorite Van Halen song. This is one of my favorite songs of all time. It has such a vibe and an energy that I think is literally unmatched.
Yeah.
I go like when I hear like heavy, Between the Buried and Me, when I hear White Walls and the moment at like 9:40, the breakdown moment, that gets me going. Like that gets me wanting to murder.
Yeah.
The second Hot for Teacher comes on, I know for the next 4 to 5 minutes, I'm going to go on a rampage. Like it's one of those songs where it's not the heaviest thing I've ever heard. It's not death grindcore metal. And yet it gets me more amped up than like being in a mosh pit sometimes.
Well, because you can tell that when they get to that verse that they mean business.
Yeah.
This isn't Van Halen that has to prove anything. This is Van Halen that has to stay at the top of the mountain. And it's like the reason I keep coming back to that ooh is just because it really just pulls the wall down on you. And it's like, yeah, we're still here. You don't have to worry about, sure, David Lee Roth would leave and then come back. You don't have to worry about anything. You're afraid that we forgot how to play hard rock. I'm sorry. People forgot that we know how to play hard rock.
Yeah.
And that's what does it for me.
The ooh is jumping off the cliff. It's jumping out of the airplane when you skydive.
Yeah.
Like that's that moment.
Yeah.
Where it's like, all right, I'm free falling now. Here we go.
Mm-hmm. It's a consistent shot of adrenaline.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, and it's one of those things too, where like I was saying about the swagger of David Lee Roth. Nobody else could have done that noise at that second and had it be so brazen in its effort to be cool. It's James Dean, it's Marlon Brando walking up to you in a leather jacket. It's like, it's Steve McQueen in Great Escape. It's like, okay, all right, yep,
Yeah.
you got me.
Yeah, I think when we're done recording, I think I'm going to listen to it. That's how good it is. Like, it just talking about it again makes me want to listen to it again. That's how good this song is.
Yeah, perfect song.
Yeah. But then that's not even the end of the record, even though we just talked like 20 minutes about that song, maybe not 20, but we go on from there to a complete 180 with I'll Wait. Like you just had literally driving 200 miles per hour. Let's take it back down to like 45.
Yeah.
And yet their 45 mile per hour song, I love it. Mm-hmm. And this is the most like, even though Jump has a lot of synth and it's perhaps the most new age Van Halen, this really feels like Van Halen of the 80s is I'll Wait, right? It's so synth induced. It sounds like the 80s. The drum sound almost sounds like electronic in this song, which I don't know if it is or not, but it has that sort of weight to it. Love the way this song sounds. Even though it sounds so much not like Van Halen a lot of times, I still love the way it audibly plays on the record.
Yeah. So I want to make sure I'll Wait is the one that has kind of like a power ballad vibe.
Yes.
Correct? I think that it makes a lot of sense on this record. Because, going back to that stadium thing, now you've got probably 15,000 grown women fawning over you. Fuck yeah, dude, we're writing a power ballad. Mm-hmm. We're putting the chorus on the guitar. David Roth, he's going to sing his little heart out. You're going to be dragging people out of there. It's going to be...
It's such an 80s move.
It is. And I think what makes this song work so well is it's still Van Halen.
Yeah.
They didn't drop Van Halen to write a power ballad. They said, how does Van Halen write something that's going to compare with like Extreme, which is very funny because after Hagar, they get Gary Sharon. And this almost feels like them being like, hey guys, we're also going to do this. They went back to the toolbox. They went back to the toolbox and they said, okay, well, how do we do that? And I think that's really cool.
We don't talk about Van Gary.
We
talk about Van Halen, Van Hagar. Sure. Van Gary. No, that didn't happen. Van Halen 3 is not a record we talk about.
He deserves the respect for trying.
He deserves the respect of his, of his career for sure. But when he joined Van Halen, nah, there's a reason there's only one Gary Sharon record,
which is crazy.
It's not crazy. Listen to that record and you're like, yeah, this doesn't work.
Just crazy that they didn't give it a second try.
So, Cody, if I'm not mistaken, earlier you said that you agree with me on Drop Dead Legs being kind of whatever. And then I made the claim that I think there's another song here that is kind of also whatever. I'm wondering if we agree what that song is. Because then we get to Girl Gone Bad, which is a very deep cut, not famous, very, on this record, but not one of the big songs on this record. I'm wondering how you feel about this song.
It feels like they had to sell it. Like, it feels like... So there's a really, really interesting thing happening where a lot of these songs are either really pop-driven or it's almost like they're a dichotomy of each other. We're either swinging super hard into being guitar music again or we're swinging back into pop music. And Girl Gone Bad is a good song. It just feels like if I had to cut a song, this would probably be the one. Because I like it, but it's just not it's not a good example of what Van Halen's doing at this point.
I disagree.
That's fair.
I like Girl Gone Bad a lot. This is not the other song. And there's only one other song after this, so now you can put two and two together. I think Girl Gone Bad is a really cool deep cut Van Halen song because it sounds like they heard The Song Remains the Same by Led Zeppelin. They were like, I want to do that. I want to do that song, but Van Halen style. And I think they actually pulled off pretty well. I like the sort of the drum trilling of and then they go into that sort of like propelling, galloping riff. I don't think it's, top tier. I don't think it's Hot for Teacher, Panama Jump. It's nowhere near those songs. But as a song on this record that usually is not put in the same camp or environment as those songs, I think it still holds its weight pretty well for 1984.
That's fair. I wish I had more of an opinion.
Yeah.
It to me, I could see why it's on the record. I'm happy that it is on the record. But if I had to say cut one song, it's probably this.
For me, it would still be Drop Dead Legs if one song has to go.
Yeah.
My number 2, actually, though, is the final track on here, House of Pain, where is also a very deep Van Halen track, never gets radio play, never is in the conversation for best Van Halen song. And it's not that it's bad, right? It's still, all these songs are good songs. None of them are anywhere below like an 8 out of 10 for me, right? This is still like an 8 out of 10 song, but it's also a song that's kind of forgettable. I think it's more memorable than Drop Dead Legs just because of the sound of it.
Yeah.
But I mean, David's vocal performance on this, I find kind of weird. It's just, his verses are very odd. And I think the chorus is kind of cool, how he holds out pain. But it's also a song that, like I said, with Drop Dead Legs, where like a week from now, I'm going to have to play it again to remind myself, what does that song sound like? What happens in that song? Which is not the case, obviously, for half the songs on this record.
I agree. Like I kind of said at the beginning, 6 unbelievable songs. But also at the same time, I think the priorities when they were writing this record were different.
For sure.
And I think that's what it is. Where like these are still, it's a good song. Same with Girl Gone Bad. Still a good song. But it's when it's Van Halen, who really, frankly, kind of shoot themselves in the foot, because they're a band where they're either really, really on, or, and it's just one of those moments where it's like they could have done more work, and it's a good song. Any other band, it'd be a great song, but for a band who in this record pulled synths into hard rock, and then also said, we can still really, really play our guitars, boys. Don't you worry. It just feels like a weird way to end the record. Whereas with the first Van Halen record, what ends on, it's on fire. Yeah. Okay, cool. That's awesome. Like, do it. Swing into it. Record's over. This feels like we're still going to play songs after this. We just have to put something here.
Do you think I want to go back to Hot for Teachers for a second, because for those who don't know, this is the first song on side 2. If you own the vinyl, you start side 2 with Hot for Teacher. Do you think Hot for Teacher serves better as the first song in side 2 or the last song in the album?
Oh, dude, it should be the last song.
I think it should too, because the way the song ends with the big band ending of just everyone hitting their instruments and like going crazy, that'd be a killer way to end this record.
Yeah. Well, Hot for Teacher in a way makes me feel the same way that you feel about like the Abbey Road medley, where it's like, man, people can try. You're not doing it.
Yeah.
And I think especially too, it serves as a really great time capsule for the era of like, because history will show that David Lee Roth leaves after this, right?
Yep.
So you've got these two parties in the Van Halen camp. You've got, we want to keep going pop music, or we want to make big guitar. And what I think Hot for Teacher does really well is, sure, the first wave of the band's going to be over, but man, did they walk out on top. And I don't think there's a better way they could have ended the record, hypothetically, than you go through everything else and you sit through the kind of muck of those last 2 songs. And then what do you get? It's like, frankly, an unmatched song.
Yeah.
The only song that I could think that's even in a similar vein that reaches anywhere near this is like Dr. Feelgood. And that's not even touching its foot if it's climbing the mountain.
There's a, not to bring Rush into this conversation, but I do love Rush. There's a documentary we spoke about on the Rush episode called Beyond the Lighted Stage. And there's this moment where they talk about La Villa Strangata, which is a Rush song. And Mike Portnoy from Dream Theater is like, growing up as a drummer, you were not good at drums. You were not great at drums unless you could play La Villa Strangata and do it well, right? Hot for Teacher is a similar thing for me, where it's like, you don't call yourself a master of drums or great even at drums unless you can play Hot for Teacher. That opening bit. Like, if you can play that, I'll take you seriously, right?
Yeah.
Even on guitar. If you can play Hot for Teacher on guitar, and do it well, I'll take you seriously, right? But if you can't do it, you got to play something else to prove it to me.
Yeah.
And I can't even play Hot for Teacher on drums. So what does that say about me? Or at least I can't play the intro, right? It's like you said, it's one of those songs that's just like, throw it in the archives, throw it in the National Library of Congress, like let the aliens discover this 5,000 years from now, because when they discover it, they're going to throw fucking parties for Hot for Teacher. Yeah, they're going to be like, we're going to discover the history of this race or this group of individuals who are no longer here because we have to know what this is. It's one of those songs.
Yeah. Yeah.
With that being said, then, Cody, when you put these two records together, which for me at least, I'll say I think this is easily Van Halen's 1 and 2 in terms of their two best records.
Yeah.
There could be arguments elsewhere, but I think financially speaking, commercially speaking, critically speaking, these two are pretty much at the top on every list you'll ever look at. The question, of course, is which one is number 1 versus number 2?
So personally for me, Van Halen 1, that not only sits at the top of the Van Halen discography, that sits atop most of hard rock for me, because it's just it's so honest in its attempt. Because sure, does it have weird moments? Yeah, it's weird they do a doo-wop song. It's weird that they're playing straight up like a blues riff, an acoustic guitar blues riff that people are like singing over. That's about an ice cream man. That's a weird analogy. But like, for what it did, the whole thing, a lot of bands. I mean, look at the Deep Purple episode that we did, you know? Sure, Machine Head is a top 10 hard rock heavy metal album. Has moments that are less cohesive than this. But what I think 1984 does well is really ushers in Van Halen going, we are not a one-trick pony. As long as you give us a new instrument to play with, we're going to have fun. And it's amazing because you would think losing a singer would derail your success. And it's like, no, we're just going to bring someone else who can sing and play guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just going to keep fucking going, dude.
And the funny thing is, honestly, I think David Lee Roth is a better frontman than Sammy Hagar, but I think Sammy Hagar is the better singer, right? He just 100%. Sings way better than David Lee Roth does at the end of the day. Now, I prefer Roth era Van Halen to Hagar era Van Halen. I think most Van Halen fans do. And Cody, there was a part of me going into this episode that's like, I feel like Cody's going to pick 1984 because I'm right there with you. I think Van Halen 1 is not only, I think, the best work Van Halen ever did. I think arguably, maybe, it might be the best hard rock album ever for me. It just like, you think what classic rock and Abbey Road have together, where when I think classic rock, I immediately think Abbey Road. When I think hard rock, one of the first things I'm thinking of is Van Halen 1. Yeah. And Eruption, and You Really Got Me, and Atomic Punk, and Feel Your Love Tonight. Like, that's that whole amalgamation of everything they did. For a first freaking record, out of the gate, they change everything. Much less Eruption, literally all four of them just like set the stage for what comes after them. Hair metal, the 80s in some respects. Like 1984 is amazing, and it's got my favorite song on it is Hot for Teacher, right? It's got my favorite Van Halen song, but that's not nearly enough to shift the whole paradigm that Van Halen 1 does.
No. And I think what the first Van Halen record does really well is that it just kind of sets the stage for what hard rock should be.
Yep.
Because if you really listen to Van Halen 1, the drums are almost like punk drums. You listen to Hot for Teacher, which isn't off of Van Halen 1, but it almost has a similar intro to like Rise Above by Black Flag, which is really, really cool. Because Black Flag wasn't opening for, Black Sabbath or Rush or Kiss, Mm-hmm. And what I think that Van Halen 1 does well, kind of continuing that conversation, it has this youthful energy, but it's got this almost elder wisdom of like, if we're going to try something, we have to try it really well. And we have to know where our 100% guarantee successes are.
Yeah.
And that success has come from a band that knows that they can make damn good music, and a front man who knows that he might not be the best singer, but man, you're going to watch him. And of course, we've talked about it, but you've got Eddie Van Halen, who single-handedly took a technique that he saw on a TV show once when he was a kid. But Django Reinhardt, Django Reinhardt is now, he's like the guy kind of who discovered how to do it, because it's an old flamenco technique. But to take it and then instead go, I can use this to really create nice dynamics, to take a fucking Marshall and turn that shit all the way up and go, all right, dude, we're just going to make it loud as hell. That's what the record does, is it holds this youthful innocence of like, not everything we're going to do is going to work, but man, everything we're going to do is going to succeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the greats. One of the greatest bands to ever do it.
Yeah.
And, they've got a discography to prove it. And I'm glad they have a discography to prove it, because some bands like Led Zeppelin definitely have the discography, but then they, Bonham died and then it's over. There's nothing left. But
yeah,
you look at bands like Van Halen and David Lee Roth leaves, and they could have easily been like, well, there goes the band, right? Even though Eddie and Alex are still, and Michael are still here. Like we could end it right now. And they go, no, man, we're still here. Like there's three of us. I think we can still do this. And then they pull in Hagar, and it's like, yeah, 5150 is an amazing record. Like maybe not toe to toe with these two, but easily my number 3, because some of that stuff on that album is amazing.
Crazy.
But bands do what they do. And luckily Van Halen did what they did. And we live here to talk about it.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Eddie.
Yep. Rest in peace to a guitar legend.
Yeah.
As for us, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in and being you. For myself and Cody, we appreciate you being here, and we'll see you on the next one.
Take care.